Hey trailblazers and tarmac tacklers, welcome back to the Maximum Mileage Running Podcast. I am Nick Hancock, USCA and Ultra and UK Athletics certified running coach, and I'm here with...
Hello, it's Faye, running coach and personal trainer, and lots of various other fitness related stuff here with Nick today to chat all things running. My
trusty co-host. Today's podcast, you recorded yourself with a guest of yours, didn't you?
I did indeed. So today's podcast is with Chelsea Creak, who very recently was the women's overall winner of the UK and Netherlands Golden Trail series, and might be something that not all of you are aware of, but it's in the last kind of, I'd say 5 or 6 years where it's really started to grow as a series of races.
Golden Trails, yeah. I mean, in my mind, it's massive now. It was even on Amazon Prime at one point. Like they did a series of the races.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those race series that is exciting because all the races are so different. There's not really any uniformity to the races they pick or the routes they do. It's like a real pick a mix of a race series.
Yeah, I mean.
So yeah, I've spoken to
I was going to say the likes of Killian and David Magnini, and I'm trying to think of some of the female runners now, but like there are some big names that have done some of the Golden Trail series. They are some awesome races.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was really nice to speak to Chelsea and find out how she got to where she got in what is you'll find out when you listen to the podcast how her journey into running began, and how, you know, she kind of took it in her stride and as a result has been really successful with it. So yeah, please have a listen and you'll find out more.
Cool. Nice. I'm looking forward to it actually, because I've not actually listened back to the audio yet. I'm waiting for it to actually come out so I can listen to it as a proper a new podcast without me on it, without me listening to my own stupid voice. Very good. Exciting.
Yes.
Anyway, we were actually, before we started recording this intro, we were jabbering on about something. I stopped us, and I was like, we need to be recording this because this is actually quite good for people to hear. So we've seen a little bit of an influx of inquiries recently about people doing UTS next year. So Ultra Trail Snowdonia, which I did this year. I did the 55k. I was supposed to do the 100-mile, but because of Alison's health, I dropped down to the 55k, which was brutal. I mean, it was brutal. It was, in my case, very much not helped by the fact that it was so hot and I suck in the heat. Like, I like biblical rain. I'm quite looking forward to my, at time of recording, trip up to Penavan in the Brecon Beacons tomorrow, and the weather looks horrific and I can't wait.
It does. And you're lovely for you. It'll be quiet. About the only time it's ever quiet up there is if we send in some biblical rain and winds and it keeps people away.
Yeah, I might actually be able to get a picture of myself on top of it without having to queue.
Yes, exactly.
Which drives me mad. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we were chatting about ETS because take the heat away. It is brutal. I the terrain is very technical. You're talking about grade 1 scrambles in places, not so much on the 55k, but it is a very, very demanding place to run, even at short distances. I mean, my 50k PB with 3,000 feet of elevation on this one was 3:59. I just dipped under 4 hours. This 50k just took me just under 10.
Yeah. It's a completely different thing. Like we were just saying, it's not even comparable to. It's not even a running race.
Yeah,
it's a foot race, yes, but you have to take such a different approach to it that you would to any other kind of run. or race that you've done before, which I suppose is why it's so exciting, because you do get to take a totally different approach to it. And it's not so much about, it's just, I always think my first thought is always keep yourself safe, always. And, manage your mind, because that's the bit that will let you down, particularly on the technical stuff once you get tired. I always think,
But I mean, put it this way, on the safety aspects, as I was running down the pig track, you could see the helicopter, the mountain rescue helicopter. I thought, someone's got themselves in trouble, because there were tourists everywhere that day. And I mean, I ran past a woman with two mountain leaders. At that very moment, I could hear her crying, and I was like, and what she was wearing, I was like, you just shouldn't be up this mountain. And then as I ran another sort of 30, 50 yards down past her, and could see 6 mountain leaders, and then ran past the 6 mountain leaders carrying a stretcher with her husband's body on it, dead. It's not a forgiving place to be, Snowdonia.
No, not at all. And it's something you have to, when you're running or in that environment, it's, forget, and I'm not saying this about anyone in particular, but I always think, forget your ego and forget the glory, just keep yourself safe, and equally keep other people safe as well. There's always that thing of, if you, like you said, if you see someone in trouble or you're in trouble, you always hope that there's that reciprocal kind of someone's got their eye on you. And just keeping yourself safe is always, and getting to the end in one piece is the objective, I think.
Now, going back to sort of our original point, I think we've seen a little bit of an influx of people coming in. I particularly see, so I'm on the UTS Facebook group, and I'm seeing a particular influx of people who have never done an ultramarathon before. Some have never done a trail run before, and that's okay. Like, that's fine. But I think the realization of some of the people that I'm seeing on the UTS Facebook group is that, oh shit, I've picked a really fucking hard race here. And I hear people say, I mean, I've got a friend who completed the 100-mile. He said it was the hardest 100-miler he's ever done in his life. I've got a friend who has won multiple Centurion events. She's been first lady at multiple Centurion events, like the North Downs Way and stuff. An extremely accomplished ultra marathoner. She did the 100K, and she said it was the most brutal event she's ever done. Brutal. And we are seeing people, I think, whether you like UTMB or not, they have found themselves in the news recently for all the wrong reasons with regards to the Whistler race and what they've done with Gary Robbins. I think we've even talked about this on the podcast before at some point, or we've at least talked about this. But whatever you think about UTMB, they are attracting a bigger audience into trail running now, and with that, I think, personally, they do need to be taking more responsibility for who they let into these races, because there are no entry requirements, even into the 100-miler, which is bonkers.
And I agree. I think there just needs to be, as it grows, like with all sports that have come from almost like nothing to exploding, you have to think about prerequisites to entry, because for their own safety. I mean, I've done a number of races in Europe, and they all have asked for prerequisites of experience, to the point where you've got to list everything you've done, in what time, when you did it, and and they want medical notes, and they want they want everything. And of course you can lie if you so wish, which some people may do, but they want you to be safe, and they want you to enjoy it, because man, that would be a really blinking long day and hell on earth to be covering 100K in Snowdonia National Park and not be prepared for it.
Yeah, well,
It
like
would
I said,
just
my friend Karen, I can't remember what position she finished exactly, but like she was pretty high up the female rankings for the 100K at UTS in this year. I think she was like 24 hours.
mm,
Yeah, which is a long time for a 100K. That's
I
a
was
long
yeah,
slog.
yeah, because if you when you listen to the podcast, me and Chelsea talked about a race called the Ring of Steel, which is in
Mm,
Scotland, which I
yeah,
did in 2017 and Chelsea did this year as part of the Golden Trail series. And that route is 16 miles, so about 27K,
yeah,
but it can take you 4, 5, 6 hours
yeah.
because it's not just 16 miles. It's yeah. So it's all relative. It's when you decide to look at a race or your best mate's gone, hey, I'm doing this race, fancy it. Just take a minute. Just take a minute and read the race profile and read the race description and have a look at the time of the winning time
Mm,
or some of the average times before you sign up, just because it puts it into perspective.
it does. Yeah.
And I think that's just really important, especially as these, like you say, these races are growing. The number of races are massive now. If anybody listening is signed up to the UTMB like mailing list, the list of like worldwide races is now like this
Yeah.
long.
Well,
And,
it's Iron Man
it's
expansion at its
insane,
finest.
just madness, and you can essentially just go, I fancy that,
Mm.
and just pay the fee and away you go, which is fine, but just make sure you are prepared, because it will just not be fun if you get there and it's just, yeah, it won't be a fun day out.
Which is a excellent thing to say as a segue to kind of my point really of some of these people that have been commenting on the UTS Facebook going, oh, hey, I'm doing UTS this year. I've done a couple of road marathons. Is there a training plan for me to follow out there? It's not about following a training plan for a race like this. I I get it. Some people perhaps can't afford a coach, or maybe they think they don't, they can't have a coach because they're not an elite athlete, and all of this kind of stuff that's out there. But preparing for a race like UTS is not about running a certain amount of kilometers or miles a week. It is not about doing a certain amount of elevation per week. Yes, that stuff is important, but preparing for a race like UTS requires experience in your corner. And really, I would say to anybody who's doing UTS or any of the mountainous ultras out there in the world, get yourself a coach. It doesn't have to be me or Faye. There are
No,
some excellent coaches out there. You need to find the right coach for you. But for God's sake, don't just blindly follow a plan, because your fitness is important, but trust me, there's a lot more to preparing for a race like the UTS, particularly the 100K and the 100 miler. Holy shit, you need a coach, or
I
at
just
least
think,
some
yeah,
very good experience behind you.
I think I'd almost be inclined to suggest to anyone that came to me to just get some quality hill days in, and get those hill days in with a rucksack and not necessarily running it, but just get yourself out in the hills in that environment with someone who knows what they're doing. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable or happy on your own, I would always suggest going with someone else. And use that as part of the training, because that will help you with your confidence, your exposure to these more extreme kind of
Yeah,
descents, particularly, because that's often what gets people, is not necessarily the climbing, because the fall line is behind us, but it's when it comes to coming down the other side and you are confronted with sheer drops or
mm-hmm.
extreme kind of paths that you've not encountered before. So I think getting some quality hill days in are really valuable when it
Yeah. I mean,
comes to doing that.
I would 100% recommend anybody to, at least who is doing UTS, to get up there and recce it. You might not be able to recce the whole course, but at least recce some of it, because you're going to need to get used to some of the climbs, some of the scrambles, some of the, the footing, the best lines to take. Um, and also the weather conditions as well. I mean, this year we had it so hot. It was like 28, 29, 30 degrees apparently on some of the summits. But the previous year, they pulled the 100 milers off the mountain because it was brutally cold and windy and wet. And you need to be used to that stuff. You need to be used to it. So anyway, I'm sort of
Definitely
on a little bit of a soapbox there because it's just another UTMB buck up, in my opinion, that they are allowing people to do things like the 100K and the 100 miler. Fair enough, the 55K. It was tough. There were some difficult climbs, but I wouldn't say any of it was scary. Like some of the, I mean, because I was originally in to do the 100 miler, I went up and recce'd some of it. And there was one part of it, I got halfway up the climb. It was vertical. It was like, if I fall here,
yeah,
my sons are going to be fatherless. It was that dangerous. And you need to be used to it. And I think there should be some sort of qualifying criteria for UTS 100K and 100 mile.
they're tough. Very, yeah.
Just saying on the website, anybody entering these races needs to have their wits about them or whatever which is basically the message. That is the message that UTMB have on the UTS website. Is anybody entering this race just needs to have some sort of wits about them in the mountains, and that's it. We've kind of, that's our disclaimer. So if something happens to somebody massively inexperienced, they've said, "Oh well, we told them."
Yeah, I know, and it's just people just need to take stock of what it is and really think about what's involved. And it's no shame if you do decide that it's not like it's too much, because there's time. You could do, like you said, you could decide to do a shorter distance, or the thing with this is building it up. I'm
shaking my head here because I say I've been following this, and the 50K is full. I think the 25 is even full now. They're not allowing
they're all full.
people to change distances. They're apparently not allowing transfers. So if you've signed up to this race, unless you've taken out insurance, you're fucked.
Oh, well, I don't ever come back to that. That's I mean, okay, well, it's but yeah, I don't know what it's.
Yeah, it's just more. It's just this UTMB thing though. The whole Dacia thing was okay. If you are really an environmentalist, which I've got an electric car now, I try and do what I can for the environment. But did the Dacia thing really put me off UTMB? Not really. They could be a little bit more responsible about their sponsors, but did it really put me off? Not really. The whole thing with Whistler has kind of pissed me off. I am in the corner that isn't particularly pleased about it. And now the more I think about UTS and the kind of people I'm seeing that have entered the race, and the very limited experience that they have of trail running at all, let alone running, and being in the mountains like Snowdonia, which it is a tough place.
It's very tough. It is.
It is. Yeah. So I just think there's a lot of work for UTMB to do in many facets, and this for me is another one, just their responsibility to people's safety.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, there's me on my soapbox. How are you, Faye? How's your week been?
My week's been all right, thank you. I'm enjoying being on what is essentially my off season. So I am just running, and I'm ticking off my couple of structured sessions a week, but I'm just running, and it's bliss, because I this is the first year that I've run properly for a few years since COVID. So for me, I am chuffed with what I've done, and I am ready to just be like, next few months, I'm just going to run. I'm going to be mindful of what I do and keep it up. But I'm tired. So I'm ready to like just have a bit of easier time and do the odd cross country race and decide what I want to do next year. And
yeah. I've been sending you up and down a few hills this week, getting you that power in your legs for cross country next week. And just having a bit of fun, really, isn't it? Which is important to do. You had a busy year and you've done some big stuff this year. And
I just think sometimes there's nothing better than going, oh, I've got, I don't know, an easy 8 miler and just being there's just no pressure behind it.
Yeah.
And I'm not overly thinking the route because I'm just going to run 8 miles and it's fine. And it's just nice to not have so many parameters for a little bit.
Yeah. It'd be nice to get you under 20 minutes for parkrun because I've been.
No, it's because I'm not doing any other. No, because I'm not doing any other courses. That's why I've become a little bit ingrained in rolling out of bed, running to parkrun, which is on my doorstep, and just running that one.
Running around the park 3 times and then going home and going back to bed.
No, my routine, if I'm honest, and anybody that knows me, is I do parkrun. I then have a cup of tea straight afterwards in the clubhouse, and then I go and buy myself a coffee and breakfast.
Very nice.
And that's so that's kind of what it's become. But no, I've got a favourite park run, which is much more akin to a sub 20 minute run, not that far away. So I will go and do that whenever, sometime. Yeah,
because you've been stuck on like 2020, 2030.
And it's not going to go anywhere else with these muddy, slippery corners that we've now got. So, and puddles and everything else. So, yeah. Yeah,
good. Good. And how is coaching going?
Yes, good. I have this week welcomed 3 new people. I've got Rob, Katie, and Pam, so they're all on board now, and going well. People again, we're in this time where people are kind of, they have their races, whether it's London Marathon in April or some people have got some races like February, March time. So we're in that kind of foundation phase where it doesn't feel very exciting. I always think there's that air of like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, this is okay. This is cool. This is where we build the foundations and then we can get we can go from there. But this is, let's get that right before we go any further.
Yeah, and just have a bit of fun over the next couple of months, I think is the important thing, because marathon training, I mean, me and Holly talked about this on the podcast when she was on, and this is a time of year where people go, right, okay, I've got to start thinking about London in the spring, and then they do like 22 weeks of like pure marathon training, and like it's too much. Break it up, have a bit of fun, do some speed work, build that foundation, but just have a bit of fun over the next couple of months, particularly when you've got dark nights, dark mornings, it's pissing down with rain.
I just think you've got to make it as enticing as you can at this time of year, because it's not easy getting out the door when the weather's rubbish, and it's not easy getting out when it's dark. So just make it as enticing as you can. And, if that means going to a club session as well, if you're part of a local club and that's your kind of, I know a couple of my runners are like, Faye, is it okay if I go to training tonight? And I'm like, yes, if that means you're going to do it, because I know for whatever reason they wouldn't do it otherwise, or they can't do it otherwise. So it's important to find the things that work for them, to get them out the door and hopefully enjoy it as well. Yeah. And what about you, Nick? How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. Training wise, I did about 70k last week. I'll do about 80k this week. So and I got under the barbell today and did 90 kilo squats. So I'm kind of what am I, as a time of recording, 7-ish weeks post hernia surgery. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop counting how many weeks post surgery I am now, because I'm getting bored of it.
Just ignore it now. It's gone. It's gone.
I think now, because my mileage is back up to that kind of level, that sort of 50 mile a week, 80k a week, and I quite safely lifted 90 kilo for squats and did 8 pull-ups quite comfortably. Yeah, I feel like I'm sort of back to normal now, which is good. So yeah, I'm going to stop counting how many weeks post surgery I am. So if I say it again, say shut up now. It's just a fucking hernia. You
well,
wuss.
I wouldn't want one. So no, that's fine.
But yeah, no, good. I mean, I'm 100%. Am I anywhere near the kind of speed and strength, running strength? No, definitely not. But then again, I have had a cold as well last week, which was quite annoying. Just a head cold. I have a bit of a rule of if it's above the neckline, then you should be okay to run. But if you've got any illness below the neckline, so cough, phlegmy lungs, any of that kind of thing, chest infection, then don't run. But I ran last week and it didn't feel particularly good. But yeah, fine. This week running quite nicely. So yeah, I did a little bit of heart rate stuff this week, just trying to sort of keep myself in the right place. Which would make an interesting conversation actually, because I've had a few new runners join yourself and me this week. The last few weeks actually, and it's kind of a good time, I think, to remind ourselves that easy, and I've been using this phrase with a few people recently, easy is not a pace, it is an effort.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say, oh, well, what should my easy pace be? There isn't such thing as an easy pace, because some days I'll go out and do a 10-minute mile, and other days my easy pace will be an 8-minute mile. And it'll all depend on multiple factors, like how much caffeine I've had, how much stress I've got going, how sleepy I am. What was my training yesterday? Was it more fatiguing than a couple of days ago? So how has my recovery been? And I think, and like I say all the time, our hearts don't care about pace or elevation or anything like that. All they care about is effort. And if we're sending our heart rates into too high a heart rate, and by the way, only measure your heart rate if you've got a chest strap, because the watches are terrible.
Yeah, exactly.
You're not developing all the right things like mitochondria, biogenesis. We want that. We want to develop our mitochondria. The mitochondria are the energy factories in our cells. And I was listening to a really good podcast with Dr. something or other the other day, and he was just sort of gave me a few reminders of why mitochondrial development is so important, and actually how we develop mitochondria, and this whole kind of people running too hard too often. All the time. Great endurance running is built on higher blood plasma volume, mitochondrial development, more red blood cells, and all of that is built in an aerobic environment. And the only way we can build an aerobic environment is by running easy, because as soon as we start running too hard, you go into anaerobic, which means without oxygen, and the mitochondria, they do develop, but nowhere near as efficiently and as much as if we're running easily. So, run easy, folks. You do need your speed sessions, but most of your running, the volume of your running is bulked up with that easy running, and it's just going to provide you with so much benefit.
Exactly. It makes me laugh because this morning there's someone that I know who I often see, and he runs at one pace, one pace only, and that pace is quite fast all the time. And there's me this morning. I think I was doing 6.5 minute Ks. I was going quite slowly. And he was speeding past me. All right, Faye. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And then in my head, I'm just going, you're always running that fast.
And then the funny thing is, you see on Strava then half an hour later,
easy pace, recovery run. Don't lie to me. Talking rubbish. that's a lie. And I just think, because I think, like you were saying, it's all down to so many factors as to what is your easy pace on a particular day. And and that's where it's so important to pay attention to your own body, and don't even look at your watch. Yeah, I don't look at my watch on an easy run. I just run. And sometimes I think, I just go with it, how it feels, and not looking at the splits on my kilometer splits. I'm just running.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to not getting, kind of letting that go.
Yeah.
I always like to say to people, think about when you first started running. And if you are one of those people who didn't run with a watch, before we had blinking, GPS watches, you just went out for a run and you just went off feel. You didn't go off, It's just remember those days. Remember those days.
Yeah, absolutely. So there you go, folks. If you want to develop your running endurance and you want to get faster, I know it's a bit fucking cheesy, but to get faster, you've got to run slower. And that's it. Anyway, I'm going to get the hell out of the way because this is your podcast. This is your chance to be the star with Chelsea. So I'm going to get out of the way. Enjoy, everybody.
Welcome to the Maximum Mileage Coaching Podcast. Faye is in the hot seat today as Nick is otherwise busy. So today I am taking over the seat of interviewing, and today I'm really chuffed to welcome Chelsea Creak, who is currently the 2023 Golden Trail Series female champion for the UK and Netherlands. And I've invited Chelsea on to chat about this fantastic achievement, but also how she got into running. So welcome, Chelsea. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm absolutely flattered to have been invited.
Oh, I have to say, it's funny because I first saw you in a running capacity last summer at Trail Marathon Wales, and I was doing the half marathon and you were doing the marathon. And when I saw you finish the race and was like, wow, and in the sense of but I was like, I've never seen this person before. And you kind of feel quite intrigued as to where someone's come from and what's brought them to, win what is a really tricky, tough marathon. One that I think is slightly underestimated by lots of people. But yeah, absolutely. So thank you for coming on and chatting. I thought we might just start with, tell us a little bit about, I suppose, where you're running. The word journey is slightly overused, but in the sense of, why did you start running? What made you start running in the first place?
Well, I guess I've always enjoyed running. I never did any competitive running as a child or sort of growing up. I was much more interested in riding my horse. And then at university, I was also very active. So I was on the rowing team. So used to doing a lot of training. We did running as part of that as well. And then it wasn't really until I think about 2016, my now husband signed me up to do the man versus horse marathon in mid Wales. And that was my first ever race. I don't think I'd ever run more than 20k before actually completing that run. And it's quite a difficult race in itself, in that it's very hilly, it can be boggy. There are also about 60 horses running at you throughout the course as well, and I absolutely loved it. So that really sort of sparked something in me. And And then we moved to France for a couple of years, and trail running is a really big thing over there. And we were living in the south of France, and it was, joining a running club was a way to meet people. So I got more interested in running and taking up sort of doing some track bits with them as well, which was hilarious because my French is terrible, and I used to go to the sessions like not understanding a word of what we were going to be doing, just running as fast as I could until someone blew a whistle at me to make me stop. And then we moved back to the UK, and I decided to sort of take it a little bit more seriously, and here we are today.
That's amazing. Might I add, good job. So you were married by the time he bought you that entry to that race?
Yeah, I think when he bought me the entry, we might have been engaged, and then during
because
he did it too. So
I have to say, Man versus Horse is one of my all-time favorite races, partly because it's just so mad in the concept of it, and it's something that every year changes ever so slightly. So it has a kind of, you're told that it's roughly 22 miles, but it could be 25 or it could be, 18. And it just depends what the route planner of that year decides to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's a brilliant race. And how great that kind of started your kind of, that sparked something in you, which I think it's just awesome when you find something and you go, oh my God, I love that.
Yeah, definitely. I had a great experience, and I think just there's such lovely people on the course as well, so that really helped as well. I was like, oh, this is such a friendly environment to be within. So
absolutely. And I think, like you say, there's something quite unusual about running along and then having some horses coming up behind you, or whatever. It's one of those very unique races, which I think if anyone can give it a go, they should give it a go, because it's just brilliant.
Yeah, definitely a bucket list race.
Absolutely. I did it. I've done it 3 times now. And in, I think it was 2019, I won it. I was first lady.
Oh, wow.
And then I've decided, obviously COVID came, and I don't know that I'll ever return. I might just retire from the race. I don't. That might be my time. I was like, yeah, that was great. And I've got my little plaque, and I'm like, it'd be hard to return to it again, having done that. But it is so much fun. And I'm thinking, oh, let's do it again. Let's see. And because like we said, it's
a relay. So they do it as a relay as well. Yeah.
That I quite fancy. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just, it's just a great race, isn't it?
Brilliant, yeah.
Absolutely. So from that, obviously, you spent some time in France and did some track running with local runners and things. And what kind of so last year when you won Trail Marathon Wales, did you know what that meant? Was it part of a plan at that stage?
Yeah, so when I came back to the UK and decided to take things maybe a little bit more seriously, I signed up with a coach. And then unfortunately it was COVID and I had an injury and things like that. So it never really got kickstarted until just before the beginning of, well, maybe the end of 2021. So coming into 2022, decided to sit down and actually make a plan of what I wanted to do. And the Golden Trail National Series came up as something that my coach had suggested. So I decided to go ahead and sign up for all of those races. So I knew that Trail Marathon Wales was going to be, I think at that point, it was the first race in the Golden Trail Series. So I did know that, but I had no idea sort of what to expect in terms of who else would be racing or what the course was really actually like, because I hadn't managed to recce it at all. So yeah, still full of excitement for it.
And I think, I don't know what you think, but you saying that you didn't know what the course was like and you didn't have any prior knowledge. Do you find that quite, do you use that as quite a motivator to race, if you, that slight unknown element?
Yeah, I definitely love exploring, and I think that that's one thing that's great about trail running, is that there are so many races in so many different areas and so many places to explore. So that unknown element is sort of a driver. But having said that, for some other races that I've done, I have proactively gone out and recce'd routes, especially when I think they've got more of a technical nature, just so that I'm familiar with that terrain beforehand. But I think with that being my first, I think during COVID, the races that I'd done then were sort of just run as like time trials. So Trail Marathon Wales was my first sort of like mass start, like proper race.
Oh.
Yeah, that I was going into since having a coach. And yeah, that was really exciting to me as well. So yeah, I hadn't gone out and been able to recce the route or anything, but we'd had a look at it in terms of Strava and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And it is one, I mean, those races are just great. And I think it's one of those marathons that is really challenging, but like you say, it's got a good balance of technical sections, some nice kind of flowing sections, but kind of leaves you that opportunity to just focus on the running. Yes. Rather than any other aspects that might come into a race. Like you say, if a race is quite technical or mentally demanding in regards to sections, it throws another element. But when you can just focus on the running, I think that's that's great, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can get into that flow as well. And I think, yeah, that really just helps mentally. And I think having so it's run as a sort of figure of, well, it's 2 loops, isn't it? So that also helps to me. Like when I'm racing, I like to break things down. So to be able to break it down into 2 loops, which are almost, when you get to that midpoint, it's about halfway. So mentally, for me, that works really nicely as well.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, actually. It kind of gives you that kind of checkpoint. I suppose those that aren't familiar with the Golden Trail series, how would you describe it? Because it's quite an interesting series, and especially an interesting series to kind of been signposted towards, because it's quite varied. The races are really varied. And yeah, so for anybody that might not know about the Golden Trail series, can you describe what it's like and what the concept is?
Yeah, so the Golden Trail series, it's kind of split into 2. So you've got the Golden Trail World Series, where you've got events that are going on across Europe and America. And I think that in the coming year, they're going to be spreading into Asia as well. And then you have the Golden Trail National Series. So as we've been talking about, like the Trail Marathon Wales, that's part of the Golden Trail National Series in the UK, and it's now combined with the Netherlands as well. And so they run a number of qualifying races, and then your points, which are based on how you place within those races, are added up, and I think it's your best 2 overall out of those races equal your score to being, as to whether you're going to get into the UK final or not. And then you've got the final, and then if you do well in the final, I think it's the top 3 go through to the Golden Trail World Series final, wherever that's going to be. So it's moved around.
Absolutely. And I suppose going back to the types of courses that are in the series, just to give an example, this year you had, you might have Trail Marathon Wales. And am I right that you also was it the Serpentine race as well?
So there was the Serpent Trail as well, which is a 50-kilometre ultra. It's a little bit more flat compared to Trail Marathon Wales. So it's, I think, about 700 metres of climbing over the 50k. And then in terms of other qualifying races, so they obviously had there were 2 in the Netherlands as well, which I'm less familiar with. They were quite early in the season, so I hadn't made any plans to do those. And then there was also Scaffold Pike as well, Trail Marathon.
So hugely varied races, like they're not only by terrain, but also by distance. Yes. So you are looking at something that is, a marathon distance, but then you're equally looking, did you say 50k?
50k, yes.
But then am I right in thinking that for example, this year's final, UK final, you were up in Scotland doing the Ring of Steel.
Yes. Yeah.
So that race, if anybody knows, is 16 miles, right? 16 miles?
I think, it's about 27k, yeah.
Really blinking hilly, like mountains. So it's a complete contrast to the other races. When it comes to your training for that kind of variety, I mean, what do you focus on? What's your kind of consistent element, I suppose, to be able to tackle that kind of variety of races?
I think my focus has been on hills, so making sure that I get enough hill training in, because I think if you can tackle the hills, then the 50k is, it's going to kind of handle itself anyway. But so this year it's definitely been making sure that I get out into bigger hills, because whilst I live in Bristol, there are hills here, they're not that large, so trying to get into Wales, Snowdonia as much as possible to practice on the mountains, and then during the week hill interval sessions are key, and then I also do some flat interval sessions as well, so to make sure that I've got the speed for things like Trail Marathon Wales, where you've got lots of runnable sections, and also Serpent Trail. And then, long runs. So I've been sort of going between doing more hilly long runs, and also doing sort of trail progression runs as well. So kind of mimicking what you would do in marathon training, but trying to do it on the trails. So progressively getting faster as you go, which, has been something that, it's new for me for this year, something that we've implemented into my training plan.
Absolutely. Well, that's brilliant. And it just shows, doesn't it, how I'm always trying to persuade people that hills are really good. I'm often greeted with I don't believe you. I hate doing hill reps. But I love hills, and a bit like yourself, if someone gave me the choice between a hill rep session and a flat speed session, I'm always going to take the hills. Always. But that's really interesting, and it just shows how you can, utilize what you have available to you and get the best out of it just by working those training sessions and adapting to what you have at a given time. So it just shows how, as a runner, you can be really quite versatile without realizing it, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. And I think for me, interestingly, like having focused so much on the hills, it was great to see how fast I could still be, because I had in my brain, I was like, I haven't worked on my speed work as much as the previous year, but actually the hills have converted into speed in itself. So that's been really great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that confirms that hill work is fantastic for building strength, and strength can equal speed. And it's not always as black and white as I must run, kilometer reps on a flat piece of tarmac to be super quick.
Yeah.
Which I think is always a good thing to share with people. But no, that's brilliant. And I suppose with in 2022, I remember you were on track to have a really successful year, but was there injury? You encountered an injury at some point.
So I had a really successful time in the Golden Trail National Series qualifiers. So I won Trail Marathon Wales. I then went on to win the Serpent Trail, and then had a good race as well at Scafell Pike. I was then selected to go to the World Finals for the Sky Running Championships. Unfortunately, these were a week before Ring of Steel, which was again the UK final for the Golden Trail National Series, and it was just a great opportunity. And I decided to take the opportunity, and just thought, I'll just spend that entire week just making sure I can do everything possible to recover in between. I'd been out to the course in Italy for the Sky Running Champs, recce'd the route, was sort of quite happy with how I felt I could race it. got through the most technical section on race day, super happy, went to push on to take someone on, and I just stood on a rock which I thought was stable. It wasn't stable, and my ankle just made a lovely snapping sound and I just instantly couldn't stand on it, and it was so painful and so swollen. And I was incredibly lucky that I was so the injury happened right next to some photographers who very kindly took it in turns to piggyback me down the mountain to the next aid station, because we were still quite high up at that point. But yeah, it turned out that I'd quite severely damaged the ankle in terms of the ligaments. And there was just no way at all that I was going to be able to race the following weekend for the UK final, let alone walk on it. So yeah, it was completely gutting, having worked really hard, and it was my dream to get to the UK final. And yeah, I was just very depressed after that, really, thinking about it. But
it's hard, isn't it, when, like you say, you've put everything into place to make something work, and you've got a plan, like you said, to be familiar with the course and make sure you've got time to rest and recover in between. And then, as with, these things, we encounter that freak thing on a course that can, do exactly what you said and throw things into the air. And after what was a really successful year. So I can imagine that was incredibly difficult to come to terms with when you've done so well through the rest of the year.
Yeah, and I think it was made harder knowing that I almost only just needed to finish the final race in the trail series to be able to qualify for the world finals. So that made it just that little bit harder, knowing, like, I tried going to the physio being like, can we strap it up? Is there anything we can do? And they were just no. I mean, the strapping lasts for a maximum of like 2 hours.
Oh, right.
Like 4 hours, and I couldn't walk on it at that point. So I think, trying to tackle Ring of Steel just wouldn't have worked.
Oh, no.
But, no, I was given some great advice though by my coach that was just like, let yourself have time to grieve about it, because it is upsetting when you've worked really hard for something and it was within reach. So just set yourself a time, like whether that's a day or a week, and then after that point, that's it. You just move on, you make new plans, new goals. And so and that was really great advice, actually, and that really.
Absolutely. And I think to have that sound advice and that kind of rational input, especially when you are feeling disappointed and sad, to have someone say, look, it's okay, it happens, let's start again. And I suppose in the sense of, build on what you have achieved already and go from there. And you prove that, obviously, from, so from that injury, how, I can imagine that you felt there was some unfinished business and you were thinking, right, 2023, this is it. I'm going to sort this out and we're going to have another go. Did you approach it? Because you'd had a really good year in 22. Did you feel more prepared, or did you feel a degree of pressure trying to have another go in 2023?
That's a really good question. I think it was a mixture of both. So I was, I definitely wanted to have another good crack at doing the Golden Trail National Series. But equally, I mean, going into any race series, you never know who else is going to turn up. Nothing is ever guaranteed. And I knew that I had to work really hard still to be able to qualify again, even for the UK national final. So I definitely felt that, that I put pressure on myself, and equally I put other pressures on myself in that, you can't guarantee it's going to be there. So I was deciding on what times I wanted to target for those races, having known what I'd done previously and what I thought I could do. But I was really excited to have another go, and just try it out and try and get to the UK final again.
Absolutely. Did you take a different route this year, or did you do the same races?
So I did Trail Marathon Wales and Serpent Trail this year, whereas I also did Scaffold Pike last year. There were the two races in the Netherlands where I think the first race was in March, and that was just too early in the season for me. I wasn't really back to comfortably being able to run until January time. So to be able to do a marathon in March just wasn't going to happen. I think the other race in the Netherlands was in May, and I was also targeting UTS 50. So again, that one wasn't going to happen. So I said, okay, we'll go and do Trail Marathon Wales, Serpent Trail, and then probably Scaffold Pike. But I didn't end up doing Scaffold Pike based on the scores that I had from Trail Marathon Wales and Serpent Trail. I didn't think it was necessary to sort of race another race, risk injury when I had the UK finals around the corner. So.
Yeah, and might I add, what an absolutely outstanding race you had at Trail Marathon Wales. You took 10 minutes off 2022, and I was running as well, and I came in 7th, feeling like I'd been wrung out by, and I just was like astounded by your time. It was fantastic. And I think, I don't know, but as an outsider, perhaps, having had that setback with the injury, you'd built yourself back even stronger. And I guess that determination also played a big part in that result.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there were a lot of things that kind of played into that. So obviously I wasn't able to do any running really over the autumn and winter prior, but I was doing a lot of work on the turbo, a lot of strength and conditioning, and working sort of almost every week with a physio to make sure that I could be in the best possible shape coming back into running. And then I think, just consistency and training. I've been working really hard on fueling, so not just fueling during races, but fueling just every day, and taking into account all the other things in life that add on to that. So like dog walking and like working and things, like making sure that I'm fueling like evenly throughout the day and not just around my training. So that's been really key. And then also just working on sort of like race psychology as well. I think in 2022, with it like Trail Marathon Wales being my first race, I was really nervous, and I really struggled in 2022 with all my races in terms of like race day nerves and race day nerves the day before. So had anyone asked me to do sort of an athlete Q&A the night before, I would have tried to do anything to get out of it. And Matt actually asked me in 2022 to do one before Scaffold Pike. And I was so nervous beforehand, and I was dreading it, and I was like shaking as we were waiting. And then thankfully for me, the weather was horrendous and it got cancelled. I was so incredibly relieved not to have to do this Q&A session, thinking like, why would anybody want to hear from me? But then, this year, I think just the results from last year, and then working as well with a sports psychologist and things, we've really got, my race day nerves and things dialed in. And so doing the Q&A sessions with Matt before things like Trail Marathon Wales and Serpent Trail has been more of a pleasure than making me feel incredibly anxious and worried about it. So I think all these things have sort of played into getting faster times this year, which has been really great.
That's great. And it's just confirms that running or any sport is so much about the mind and how we manage our thoughts and the processes before races, during races, after races, and like you say, on a daily basis, how we manage the many different factors that play into life. And I mean, you made a really good point there about fueling on a daily basis, not just focusing everything on, just before you go for a run or during the run. It's about every day and how you kind of build those foundations, I guess, to help all the training as well. Yeah,
definitely. And making sure that you can recover properly as well from your training too. So it's definitely worked this year.
How do you find, I mean, working full time and, having, I always think people laugh when I say this, but I've got dogs, and I know it sounds really silly, but when you've done a long run or you've, done a hard training session, you're like, oh my God, I've got to walk the dogs. Like it's just one thing too many, and I'm not sure how far we're going to get. How do you manage, how does your training kind of manifest itself, on a weekly basis? How do you kind of make sure you fit everything in while still kind of looking after yourself and making sure that you are, like you say, fueling well? Because it's very easy, isn't it, in day-to-day life to go, oh, I'm too busy, and then end up skipping lunch or not eating the right thing. It must take a lot of discipline to kind of make sure you keep yourself juggling all those things, but equally managing it at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I don't always stick to plan, and things do happen, and I'm having to ask my husband to take the dogs out on extra walks and things, but he obviously supports me a lot, and we take it in turns with the dogs. And Brecken, she is great, so she's my training partner, so she comes out on a lot of the runs with me. There are certain training sessions that she definitely won't come out with me on, and that she really hates hill reps. So she'll do like one rep and then sit at the bottom and just sort of like laugh at me as I'm like, why are you doing this? This year, working 8:30 till 3:30 at the moment. So I try to make sure that I can finish on time, do my training, make sure I have good dinner, and then I've got a bit of time in the evening to just recover from the day, from work stress, from training stress and things as well. So I tend to do my training sessions in the afternoons, and I'm responsible for the early morning dog walks.
I see. There's always a price to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's really good. And that kind of makes a really good point you say about having time in the evening to kind of unwind, process what the day's brought, and kind of make sure you get a good night's sleep, make sure you've eaten well in preparation. Well, not only for recovering from that day's session or, whatever's been going on, but equally prepare yourself for the next day, because it can be quite hard, can't it? I mean, depending on how life goes, if you've had a tough training session and preparing yourself for, maybe not as tough, but a long run or something that's quite demanding, but in a different way, and making sure that you see that, you've done everything you can to get the best out of that.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting because going back to the start, you commented about your first race was man versus horse. Have you, I mean, I always have this conversation with people because I'm not too keen on road running. And I always think, is there any part of you that's ever done road running, or is there any part of you that would want to do road running, like cross that barrier of that kind of line into the other realm?
I have never ever done a road race before. People always ask me this. They're like, what's your 5K time? What's your 10K time? Half marathon? I have no idea. Yeah, I think it's a tricky one. There is part of me that's interested to know, just like from an experimental point of view, like how fast could I be at 5K, 10K, etc. But my love is really the trails. I just love being outside in the countryside, covered in mud. The roads just don't really interest me at all. And I think it would just put a lot of pressure, or I would at least put a lot of pressure on myself in terms of times and things. Whereas trails, I think it's a little bit easier to not put quite as much pressure on yourself because conditions change. One day where it's dry, you're going to be a lot faster than, say, at the moment when it's super boggy and wet. So yeah, for me, I think trail running is where my heart will always lie. But that's not to say that I won't ever do a road race. I just haven't yet been convinced to do one.
No, I mean, yes, I am 100% with you on that. I have done road racing and road running, but I can't remember exactly what race it was, but something, as soon as I hit a trail and was told, oh, we're going to try and get from A to B on our own 2 feet, but we've got to go over those mountains first. I think the idea of the challenge and the time outdoors, and just that, like you say, time is irrelevant, really. It's more about what you can achieve and what you get out of it, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I just think it's great for your mental health as well, just to be out there, and yeah, lots of lovely other people out on the trails, and can bring my dog with me.
Exactly.
So
No, absolutely. Wise dog. So I suppose in regards to where we've done, I changed the subject. With the final, you obviously did the Ring of Steel, and then you qualified for the final, which was a couple of weekends ago.
Yes.
So the concept of the final is quite interesting, isn't it? In the sense of it's again, they run it differently to how kind of the qualifying races are, like, standard marathons or 50Ks. Tell us a little bit about how that final kind of played out and what it was like to finally get to that final, because you'd obviously, you'd thought of it last year, and then the injury, and then it was finally there in front of you. How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I was so incredibly excited to get the invitation to the final, and it was an incredible experience. So we were out there from the Tuesday until the following Monday, and we were very well looked after. But the race consisted of two different races. So you've got a time trial event, which is, I think it's about 8.7 kilometers with 400 meters of climbing. And then the full main event, which was run in the neighbouring village, and that was 27 kilometres with about 1,500 metres of climbing. So very different from what I'd been training for all year, really, much shorter. So that was a little bit terrifying, especially the 8.7k race for me, just not knowing sort of how to pace it. But this was the first year that they'd done it where they'd split the men and women. So they had the women running on Thursday for the time trial, men on Friday, and then the women's full race was on Saturday and the men's on Sunday. So that was brand new this year as well. And then what happened was your times from the time trial and your times from the main race were added together to give you your overall score. So yeah, a completely different setup. So doing the stage race. The time trial for me, like I said, was a bit terrifying, not knowing how to pace. But at 8.7k, I was also the first person from the Golden Trail National Series to go. So,
oh God,
yeah, a little bit scary as well, knowing that you're being just chased by everyone.
I'd just be like, oh my God, that's yeah.
And there's only like 30-second gaps between people. So I was like, please, I just don't want to finish having been overtaken by everyone. But no, it went really well. I was really pleased with how I did. It was basically you ran all the way to the highest peak in the area, and then you had a big descent with some technical sections coming back down into the town of Sportone. So yeah, the weather had been pretty miserable for that week as well. So it was a bit wet, a bit windy, very British. So that was quite good.
That kind of played to your advantage.
Yeah, definitely.
I always think chuck in some adverse weather and the British people are always so prepared.
Definitely. I was so glad that it wasn't like 20 plus degrees and sunny on that day, because yeah, the heat and I aren't such good friends. But Saturday was completely different in that it was a hot, sunny day. And I think that kind of threw quite a few people as well, because we'd had this whole week of it being cooler. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's exposed and hot. Not sure how to handle this. But the race on Saturday, it was run, I think they called it a flower pattern in terms of how they designed the course. So they designed the course to be very fan friendly. So they wanted to do it so that you had multiple loops. I think in the end it was 5 loops that all came into the fan zone. So you had to run almost like a 180-degree turn around the finish line each time you finished a loop.
I did see that. I saw you, and you were almost having to come to a standstill because you were running down, and then there was a barrier, and you had to then change direction.
Yeah, which is an interesting way to design a course. And I think mentally, for some people like me, it was quite nice in that the loop system broke the race down so that into manageable sections. But other people, I think they found it very demoralizing going into the finish line each time and then having to go back out. But yeah, so a completely different style of race as well to what I'm used to, and so many fans, which was incredible. And out on the course as well, which was really, really cool. And just to be on a start line with so many elite women was just like, incredible. It like blew my mind.
I can imagine how
crazy.
Yeah, like, did you find that nerve-wracking? Do you think it helped in some way, or did you? I can't imagine what that. It's quite to stand on a start line with people and you're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't feel as nervous as I thought I would. And I think that's because I hadn't put any expectations on myself for the final races, just because my whole goal had just been to get there. And so these were the last 2 races of my season, and I just wanted to really enjoy them and enjoy the experience of being there. I knew that I hadn't trained for the shorter distances like these specifically, so I was always going to find it challenging, but and I just was trying to take everything in and just enjoy it as much as possible, really.
That's great. And I think it's that you do think, wow, to, like you said, that final was so different to the rest of the races. Preparing again for that kind of, to be told you're going to run 8.7k and cover, it's going to be 400 meters of ascent. You've been running marathons and plus over the summer. It's just such a contrast, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think based on some of the other national series races and some of the World Series races, they tend to be marathon or shorter. So they don't tend to have those ultras. So a lot of other people had trained sort of more for the 27k kind of type race. But going from Ring of Steel and then recovering from Ring of Steel and then going into this was a bit of a shock. I had a bit of it from Ring of Steel. I managed to make it all the way around the course without a problem. And then on the finish line, there's a great photo of me with my ankle at 90 degrees as I sprained my ankle on the timing mat.
Oh my God.
So I did need to have a little bit of recovery after that one before. Nowhere near as bad as the previous year, but it was the same ankle. So it just means that it's been quite stiff and things. So trying to then prepare for the shorter races, definitely challenging, but trying to do as much as I could as in the time I had allowed. So I stood on the start line just thinking, well, this is as much as I could have done. So I think that was a really good position to be in.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And like you say, just taking it all in, enjoying the experience and realizing what you've achieved, is just fantastic. And especially after last year, I think it's even better, isn't it? To be like, yes, I've done what I set out to do, and everything else is a huge bonus. Yeah.
And it was just an opportunity to make new friends and meet all these incredible other people as well. And that was just amazing.
I think the lovely thing about coming back to trail running, and again, I'm not here to diss road running, but I think the community that comes with trail running is just fantastic. It is a real little world of its own that incorporates such great positivity and supportiveness. I think no matter where you rock up to a trail race, and there's always that degree of friendliness and supportiveness. Like you said, doesn't matter whether you're stood on the start line with an elite runner, you're all part of the same team, as it were.
Yeah, and I think I found that at all of these races that I've done for the Golden Trail National Series, they've all been just amazingly run. The people that are running the races have just been so incredibly friendly. The atmosphere has been amazing. everybody out on the course has been lovely, the other runners, and yeah, so it's just made it all such a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. That's brilliant. So if someone wanted advice about getting into trail running, or what would your piece of advice be if someone was tentatively kind of thinking, oh, I fancy trying trail running, but I don't know if it's for me, whether they've never run before or whether they are a road runner because it can be quite a big thing, I think, for road runners to take that step into trail running because it is so different.
Yeah.
What would your one piece of advice be to someone?
I think the best thing to do would be to find a group of other people also, to do trail running with. So to join a club or to join like a trail running group in the local area. I know that there are new groups, especially around me in the villages around here, that are starting up, with trail running being like one of the fastest growing sports. I think that there are more and more groups. And I think, yeah, because sharing the trails is also sort of like the most fun way to do it too, with other people, and especially this time of year when it's dark, it's fun to do a head torch run with other people, and then they can look after you, give you some advice as well. So yeah, I think joining a group would probably be my best piece of advice for anyone who's interested in doing it.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah. And what would you say, I mean, even when things are going really well, but equally if you have setbacks, what is it that keeps you going? What is it that gets you back to putting your trainers on and continuing getting out the door and running? What is it that just gets you every time?
I mean, for me, I do have like this competitive spark within me. So it is, yeah, a love of racing, but also I just love being outside. And I think that any time that I've ever been injured and sort of been unable to run, I really, really just miss going out with my dog and just putting on my shoes, just going on like an easy run with her. That becomes the dream, just to be able to do that. And I think, but otherwise it's that, competitive spark within me that's just like, oh, I want to get out, I want to train, I want to be able to build and be able to do this next year, or
Amazing, brilliant. And I suppose just to finish up, what next? I know it's not long since you went to the final, but sometimes it's hard, isn't it, not to think, oh, what can I do next?
Yeah.
What shall I do next? Have you had any thoughts or ideas as to what kind of 2024 might look like for you?
Yeah, so starting to have sort of a think about plans for next year. So I've already signed up for Chianti Trail Marathon in March. So that's one of the UTMB qualifying races, because still searching for that ticket to OCC. And then, otherwise I'm quite interested in potentially doing some of the Golden Trail World Series events. So thinking about that for 2024 as well.
Exciting. So again, a bit of a variety of different courses and distances.
I think for me, I still haven't quite figured out exactly, what course and what distance I like, and it's quite nice to sort of play around with it a bit still. So having that variety is great.
And absolutely. And I think again, the great thing about off-road running is you tend to get all sorts of random distances come about, don't you? Like you said, like, the Ring of Steel is 27k, just because it is 27k. And then you might have a more, specific marathon distance, but equally you might have something that's 85k. I think great, isn't it, to be able to go, oh, I fancy doing that because of where it is. I often think, oh, if I go there, it'd be a great place for a little holiday and I get to run at the same time. And it's kind of just, again, that element of adventure that comes with it. I think that's cool. And I think it's nice to, like you say, look at different races. And now you've kind of opened the door to the Golden Trail series. Like you said, there's other races, world races that are kind of out there and are available, which is super exciting. Awesome. Thank you so much for today, Chelsea. It's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you. And I can't wait personally to see how you go next year and what races you do. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks.